Joining me now is Lia Gaines, a longtime member of the NAACP in Palm Beach County and has served as president of the organization's local chapter. We thank you for coming in. You heard both the police union and Stuart Kaplan, former FBI agent, now defending many clients in our community. Talk about the cases we talked about, and then more broadly, the state of police-community relations. After the Corey Jones case, a big push, especially in Palm Beach Gardens. Talk about that, what improvements perhaps you've seen there, and then let's talk more broadly.
Well, I'm glad that you allowed me to see that first segment, because I think it really showcases that a lot of the things that have been happening have really just been reactionary. The fact that the media has provided scrutiny has been helpful. I do, though, believe that there needs to be put into place, not just as a result or a reaction to a tragedy, some policies so that we can be more proactive to prevent and really create safer, more healthier quality of life in communities and better relationships between the police and communities as well.
What would you like to see specifically? What do you talk to police about across the county, from PBSO to the smallest agency?
Well, you know, President Obama commissioned a task force, and out of that task force there was a 21st century policing initiatives. And there were a group of individuals that were on the ground in Ferguson, and they came out with some really comprehensive solutions called Campaign Zero. And those are about 10 policy initiatives that we're looking at and we're educating the community about, so that they can go to their local officials as well as to the federal officials to try to enact these policies.
Talk about a few key ones and how or if they're being implemented here.
Well, naturally, use of force issues, restrictions on use of force. So Campaign Zero actually did some research which showed that jurisdictions that enact restrictions on use of force have a much lower level of excessive use of force and deaths by police as well. So that was significant. And for every initiative of those 10 use of force restrictions, that drop is about 15% in reduction of violent killings by police or the use of violence by police.
Has that happened here? I don't believe agencies here have adopted that.
Well, the agencies have adopted maybe some of the policy initiatives, but not these specific ones, no.
And what others would be key in your mind?
Well,
and agencies are going to argue, by the way, that we cannot, I can imagine many saying, wait a minute, we cannot put prior restraint on our officers where they go out having to think about restrictions written into guidelines on use of force, given the very real dangers that our police officers and policewomen and deputies face each and every day.
And see, that's why Campaign Zero is so important, because based on this research, that just does not bear out. Those assumptions do not bear out. In fact, the reverse bear out. The reverse shows that when you institute these restrictions on use of force, that police injuries, police killings also are reduced as well.
What else proactively are the discussions being had between the NAACP and police agencies in this community? Where do you see progress? What would be your biggest compliment and your biggest critique over the last few years?
I see progress, at least on the body cams. It seems to be that people are getting on board with the body cams, but the flip side of that is that they're not a panacea. We need training. Police officers need to be trained in de-escalation tactics, and we find that those jurisdictions that have enacted the de-escalation tactics have a better community engagement. They have better relationships as well.
And both of the gentlemen we spoke to, and in fact PBSO said to me, not averse to body cams, but it's a huge chunk of the budget, how they can fit it in. A, they're not sure right now, and B, said there are other issues like training that they thought could make more of a difference. They noted that deputy-involved shootings have been about 8 to 9 per year, 2005 to 2014. Down significantly in 2015, about 3 each year. Now, so there's a trend line there. It seems the three of you, our two prior guests, and you at least agree body cams are part of this.
Yes, they are.
But not the panacea.
No, they're not.
What else in terms of the biggest critique you'd have of local law enforcement agencies from your perspective?
Just the resistance to civilian oversight, and I mean all civilian oversight review boards. There's just been a real pushback and resistance to that. But, and I think transparency and collecting the data and reporting it.
And one question, let me flip the whole question on its head. The question always is, what more should and could police agencies be doing to build the bridge of trust and affinity with the African American community, and other communities. The flip side questions, what more does the African American community need to be doing? I have policemen and women all the time complain that we try and make an effort, we don't get help on cases where we need to find out who shot somebody. We see these kind of cases going on in places like Riviera Beach. What is incumbent on the Black community as well and other communities in terms of what they need to be doing proactively to build that bridge? It's a two-way bridge.
But see, I disagree with the premise of the question, because I really think that transparency is key and trust is key. And so we're open and ready to meet the police and law enforcement halfway with developing that trust. But there's got to be some open communication and dialogue that...
But both ways.
Both ways, yes. There's got to be some open communication and dialogue that the police need more training and more training in anti-racist and racial bias in policing as well.
Is there a flip side of that argument, though, and perhaps I didn't frame it as well as or as eloquently as I could, but is the flip side that we need to be doing more in communities to engender that same marching towards the middle, let's say, of that bridge of trust?
Well, education is key.
Trust is always a two-way street.
Right. Education and knowledge is power. And so when we see the studies that come out from Campaign Zero and how those initiatives are making a dent and a decrease, and we're educating the populace about that, getting the populace to take that information and those policies, initiatives to local law enforcement and their elected officials. That needs to happen, that communication, that dialogue.
An important, vibrant discussion that is critical to all of us in our community, wherever we may live, and we'll continue it with you. We appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in just a moment.